The United Nations is urging governments not to turn back thousands of Sudanese fleeing the war in their country. The UN says these refugees need high levels of international protection. Violence between rival military factions continues to devastate Sudan with no end in sight. Getting humanitarian aid to residents is proving difficult. The World Food Programme says nearly 17 million kilograms of food products have been looted. Of that loss amounts to more than $13 million. Officials say they receive almost daily reports of supplies being stolen from warehouses and trucks. Meanwhile, explosions have been heard in the capital, Khartoum. The army is reportedly trying to dislodge the paramilitary rapid support forces near the city centre. The conflict has killed around 700 people since it started nearly 3 weeks ago. The US believes the war will be protracted, and that's because both warring sides believe they can reach a military solution. UN officials have met in Geneva to discuss Sudan's humanitarian crisis. Alex Kadir explains the outcomes from the meeting.
Well, it's certainly one of the big questions that will come from that announcement from the UNHCR. Elizabeth Tan, their Director of International Protection, advising all governments not to return anyone to Sudan, not just their nationals, not just Sudanese nationals, but refugees that were already in Sudan or people without paperwork, without a passport. Make sure no one is sent back into Sudan. That is how bad things are. We know, according to the UN, that there's already a build-up of people fleeing Sudan on the Egyptian border. So that's one flashpoint perhaps for those people trying to get out. About 100,000 people have been displaced since the start of the violence on the 15th of April. So there's a big scale of people fleeing for their lives effectively out of Sudan, and the UN really issuing a very serious plea to countries around the world, neighbouring countries, but also further afield, not to return anyone to Sudan. There's also a big question. We've seen how tension or violence or issues in the region have led to waves of people trying to leave that region. The Libyan revolution back in 2011 led to thousands of people risking their lives crossing the Mediterranean. So this will also be a concern for the EU member states and EU countries looking at those crossings, those boat crossings in the Mediterranean. Will this spur more migratory flows from the region? That will be one of the big questions. So in short, the UN agency saying you cannot return anyone to Sudan, looking at those consequences and looking at those consequences further afield. So the situation very dramatic in the country.